Loving a soul across centuries. That's our story. Now it could be yours to read. Like, share, and subscribe to Webtoon BL Stories.
Chapter 1: The Weight of Numbers. The numbers on my laptop screen stared back at me like accusing witnesses at a trial I'd already lost. 3 months of unpaid rent. A medical bill for my mother's surgery that had ballooned to $47,000. Credit card debt accumulated during the desperate months after my last corporate client went bankrupt without paying my final invoice. And now this, a notice from my landlord taped to my apartment door that morning, informing me I had exactly 14 days to vacate the premises. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes until stars bloomed in the darkness. 29 years old, top of my class at MIT, a systems architect whose custom security protocols had been praised in Wired magazine. And I was about to be evicted from a studio apartment in a neighborhood where the sirens never stopped and the smell of week-old garbage lingered in the stairwell. Fuck! I whispered to the empty room. My phone buzzed against the cracked coffee table. The one I'd found on the curb 3 years ago and told myself was vintage industrial. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Probably another debt collector. I let it ring. It buzzed again. Then a third time. On the fourth buzz, I grabbed it out of sheer annoyance. What? Ethan Cole? The voice on the other end was polished, genderless. The kind of carefully modulated tone that screamed, corporate HR. This is Jasmine Reyes from Voss Global Talent Acquisition. I'm calling about your application for the systems architecture contract position. I sat up straighter, my heart doing an embarrassing little skip. Voss Global. The Voss Global. The company that had swallowed half the tech industry whole over the past decade, whose founder and CEO was rumored to be worth more than some small countries, whose headquarters in Seattle was a gleaming tower of black glass that seemed to pierce the clouds themselves. Yes, that's me. I applied. You applied 17 minutes after the position was posted, to be precise. There was a hint of amusement in her voice now. Our systems flagged your response time. Impressive. I remembered that night. I'd been awake at 2 a.m., spiraling through job boards with the desperate energy of a man watching his life collapse in slow motion. The Voss Global posting had appeared like a mirage, a 6-month contract, fully remote with a compensation package that made my eyes water. I'd submitted my application before I could talk myself out of it. I was motivated, I said, which was the understatement of the year. Motivation is exactly what we're looking for, Mr. Cole. The CEO himself reviewed the shortlisted candidates and requested you specifically for an in-person interview. Tomorrow, if you're available, we'll fly you to Seattle on the company jet. The CEO, Damien Voss, the man who never gave interviews, whose face was a study in controlled menace in the few photographs that existed of him. The man who had built a trillion-dollar empire from nothing and was rumored to fire people for making eye contact. You're joking, I said. I don't joke about Mr. Voss's requests. Shall I email you the details? I stared at my reflection in the dark window. Gaunt cheeks, circles under my eyes the color of bruises, the faint tremor in my hands from the third cup of instant coffee I'd had for breakfast. This was it. This was the moment the universe decided to throw me a bone after months of kicking me while I was down. Yes, I said. Send it. I'll be there. The Voss Global private jet was nicer than any apartment I'd ever lived in. I spent the 2-hour flight from New York trying not to touch anything, acutely aware that the leather seat I was sitting on probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. A flight attendant, if you could call someone that polished and intimidating a mere attendant, brought me a meal that I couldn't pronounce half the ingredients of: seared scallops with a saffron reduction, a salad with edible flowers, dessert that involved actual gold leaf, shimmering on top of a chocolate mousse. I ate it all and tried not to think about how many ramen packets I'd consumed in the past month. The plane descended through a ceiling of gray clouds, and suddenly Seattle spread out below me. A sprawling tangle of bridges and water and evergreen trees, with the Space Needle rising like a needle through a pincushion of buildings. And there, at the edge of downtown, was Voss Global headquarters. The tower was impossible to miss. 50 stories of black glass that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, angular and severe, with none of the playful curves that had dominated architecture in recent years. It looked like something a Bond villain would build. It looked like it was waiting for something, or someone. The plane landed at a private airport north of the city, and a black SUV with tinted windows whisked me through streets that grew progressively more corporate the closer we got to the tower. I'd changed into my best suit, a dark gray number I'd bought for my college graduation and had been letting out and taking in for years as my weight fluctuated with my financial stability. To fit well enough, I supposed. My shoes were polished. My hair was combed. I looked like a man who was trying very hard to look like he belonged. The SUV pulled into an underground parking garage that smelled of concrete and money. A woman was waiting for me by the elevators. Tall, severe, dressed in a charcoal pantsuit that probably cost more than my student loans. Jasmine Reyes, I assumed. "Mr. Cole," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Thank you for having me." I followed her into the elevator, which required a retinal scan and a fingerprint reader before the doors would close. "You said Mr. Voss wanted to meet me personally?" "Mr. Voss is very hands-on with certain projects." Jasmine pressed a button marked simply P, which I assumed stood for penthouse or private or something equally intimidating. "This contract involves proprietary technology that few people in the company are even aware exists. Discretion is paramount." The elevator rose without any sensation of movement, but the numbers above the door climbed steadily. 20, 30, 40, 50. Then they kept going, which shouldn't have been possible because the building was only 50 stories tall. "Wait," I said. "How?" "Mr. Voss's private floor is not reflected in public building plans," Jasmine said smoothly. "You'll understand why shortly." The elevator stopped at P, and the doors opened onto a space that made me forget how to breathe. The entire floor was open, a single massive room with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Seattle skyline and the gray waters of Puget Sound beyond. The design was minimalist to the point of severity. White marble floors, black furniture that looked like it had been carved from single blocks of obsidian, a ceiling that seemed to go up forever. But there were details that didn't fit the corporate aesthetic. Ancient artifacts displayed in glass cases along one wall, a Greek amphora, a Roman gladius, what looked like a medieval illuminated manuscript, a fireplace that definitely wasn't standard office equipment, with flames dancing behind a sheet of what appeared to be crystal. Bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that looked centuries old, and behind a massive desk of black wood, rising from a chair that could have been a throne, was Damien Voss. I'd seen photographs, of course. Everyone had. But photographs couldn't capture what he was like in person. He was tall, 6'4", maybe 6'5", with shoulders that strained against the fabric of his bespoke black suit. His hair was the color of ink, swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and hard planes, with cheekbones that could cut glass and a jaw that looked like it had been carved by a sculptor who believed in the beauty of severity. His eyes were the most unsettling part. A pale, crystalline gray that seemed to hold no warmth whatsoever, like winter sunlight reflected off ice. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, in the way a storm was beautiful, in the way something dangerous and unstoppable was beautiful, right up until it destroyed you. "Ethan Cole," he said, and his voice was exactly what I'd expected. Low, resonant, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Not American. Something older. "You're younger than I expected." "I'm 29, I said, then immediately felt stupid for stating the obvious. 29. He said it like he was tasting the number, finding it pleasing. "Yes, that's appropriate." Jasmine had vanished. The elevator doors had closed behind me. I was alone in this impossible space with a man who, according to Forbes, was worth approximately $140 billion. "Your resume is impressive," Damien continued, gesturing for me to sit in one of the chairs across from his desk. I sat. The chair was surprisingly comfortable, which somehow made it more intimidating. "MIT valedictorian. Designed security protocols for 3 Fortune 500 companies before you were 25. Your work on quantum encryption caught my attention." "Thank you, sir." "Don't call me sir. A flicker of something crossed his face. Annoyance, maybe, or amusement. Damien is fine. We'll be working closely together if you accept this contract. I almost laughed. Mr. Voss, Damien. I applied for this position because the compensation would solve every financial problem I currently have. Consider me extremely motivated to accept. Good. He stood, and I realized he'd been waiting for me to say something like that. He walked to one of the glass cases, running his fingers along its edge without looking at what was inside. But motivation isn't enough. This contract requires more than just technical skill. It requires commitment, a level of dedication that most people aren't capable of giving. I've been working 80-hour weeks for months just to stay afloat, I said. Commitment isn't a problem. He turned to look at me, and for a moment, just a moment, something shifted in those gray eyes. Something that looked almost like hunger, almost like recognition. Then it was gone, and his face was smooth marble again. Come with me. He led me to a door I hadn't noticed before, set into a wall of black panels that blended seamlessly with the surrounding architecture. His thumb pressed against a scanner, and the door slid open without a sound. The room beyond was a laboratory. Not the kind I was used to, no messy workbenches or half-assembled servers. This was pristine, sterile, with equipment I didn't recognize arranged in precise geometric patterns around a central platform. And at the center of the platform was a contract. It glowed. I blinked. Sure, I was imagining things. But no, the document, displayed on some kind of translucent screen, was definitely emitting a soft blue light. The text seemed to shift as I watched, characters rearranging themselves like living things. What is this? I asked. The agreement. Damien stood beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something woody and ancient, like a forest after rain. Voss Global's standard contractor paperwork, with a few additional clauses specific to this project. The biometric signature system ensures that your acceptance is binding. Binding how? He smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. Legally, metaphysically, you'll be connected to the project in ways that go beyond mere employment. But the compensation reflects the commitment required. $6 million for 6 months of work, plus a completion bonus of $4 million if all milestones are met. $10 million. $10 million would pay off my mother's medical bills, clear my debts, buy me an apartment that didn't smell like despair. $10 million would mean I could breathe again. What exactly am I building? A system. Damien's hand moved through the air above the glowing contract, and the text responded, scrolling to reveal technical specifications that made my head spin. An interface between human consciousness and digital infrastructure. The ability to store, transfer, and reconstruct the human soul within a network environment. I stared at him. That's not possible. Everything is possible, Ethan. The only question is whether you're willing to help me make it real. The contract floated there, glowing softly, waiting for me. I should have asked more questions. I should have walked away. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong, that this man was dangerous in ways I couldn't articulate, that the light in that room was the wrong color and the air was the wrong temperature and nothing about the situation was normal. But I thought about my mother, too proud to ask for help, lying in a hospital bed 3,000 miles away. I thought about the eviction notice taped to my door. I thought about the numbers, the endless, suffocating numbers that had been slowly crushing me for months. What do I need to do? I asked. Damien's smile changed, softened, almost, became something that might have been relief. Place your hand on the interface, he said. The biometric system will read your prints, your retinal pattern, your heartbeat. And then, he paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. Then we'll begin. I stepped up to the platform. The contract screen was cool beneath my palm, the blue light pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Something tingled in my fingers, spread up my arm, settled into my chest like a second pulse. Ethan Cole, the system said, and its voice was the same genderless tone as Jasmine's, but layered with something else, something ancient. Do you freely enter into this agreement, of your own will and consent? Yes. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. The terms have been presented. The compensation has been stated. The duration is 6 months, renewable at the discretion of the primary party. Do you accept these terms? I accept. The light flared, blinding white, and I felt something tear loose inside me. Not painfully, more like a thread being pulled from a piece of fabric, something that had been woven into my being for so long I'd forgotten it was there. When I could see again, the contract was gone. The platform was dark, and Damien was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read at all. "Welcome to Voss Global, Ethan," he said. "You belong to me now." The words should have been a joke, a figure of speech, but something in his tone made my blood run cold, because I realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that he meant them literally. And somewhere deep in my chest, where the second pulse still throbbed, something answered him. Yes. I didn't sleep that night. Voss Global had put me up in a hotel that cost more per night than my monthly rent, but I couldn't enjoy it. I lay in the king-sized bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day over and over. The glowing contract, the tearing sensation, the way Damien had looked at me when it was over. "You belong to me now." I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was a figure of speech, corporate jargon. The man was eccentric, brilliant people often were, and I was reading too much into things because I was sleep-deprived and overwhelmed and probably still running on the adrenaline of the past 48 hours. But when I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Those pale gray eyes, watching me like I was something precious. Something he'd been waiting for. I didn't fall asleep until nearly dawn, and when I did, I dreamed of fire. Chapter 2. The first binding. I woke to the sensation of falling. My eyes snapped open, heart hammering, and for a disorienting moment I didn't know where I was. The hotel room was dark, the city lights outside casting long shadows across the ceiling. Everything looked normal. Everything felt. My heartbeat. Something was wrong with my heartbeat. It was too fast, too irregular, like a bird trapped in a cage of ribs. I pressed my hand to my chest and felt it fluttering against my palm. A frantic staccato that made no sense because I'd been sleeping. I'd been perfectly still. And then my phone buzzed. I grabbed it from the nightstand, squinting at the screen. A news alert. Voss Global stock drops 3% following rumors of antitrust investigation. My heart lurched in my chest, a sharp pang that made me gasp. No, that's not possible. I stared at the phone, then at my hand still pressed against my chest. 3%. The stock had dropped 3%, and my heart had responded like I'd just been stabbed. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence. Panic attack. Anxiety about the new job. There were 1,000 logical explanations that didn't involve my cardiovascular system being tied to a multinational corporation's market performance. But I didn't believe any of them. I got dressed in the dark, pulled on the same suit from yesterday because my luggage hadn't arrived yet, and called for a car to take me to the tower. The driver was silent, which was good because I wasn't sure I could speak without screaming. The Voss Global lobby was a cathedral of polished marble and soft lighting, with a reception desk that curved like a wave and security guards who looked like they could bench press a car. I gave my name to the woman at the desk, and her expression shifted from professional neutrality to something sharper. Interest, maybe, or wariness. "Mr. Voss has been expecting you," she said. "Take the private elevator to the penthouse. You've been cleared." The elevator required another retinal scan, another fingerprint reader, but this time I noticed something I'd missed yesterday. The scanner wasn't just checking my identity. It was reading something else, something that made the machine hum in a frequency I could feel in my teeth. The doors opened onto Damien's floor, and he was waiting for me. He stood by the windows, backlit by the gray morning light, wearing a black suit that looked identical to yesterday's but was probably completely different. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his expression was expectant, like he'd been counting down the seconds until my arrival. "You felt it," he said. It wasn't a question. "What the fuck is going on?" My voice came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't care. "My heart, the stock market, that's not possible." "That's not possible, Damien." "It's possible." He turned to face me fully, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen yesterday. Regret? No. Something closer to hunger, barely restrained. You signed the contract, Ethan. The biometric binding wasn't just for legal purposes. Connected you to Voss Global at a fundamental level. Your life force, your vitality. It's now tied to the company's success. That's insane. I was shaking my head, backing toward the elevator. That's not how contracts work. That's not how anything works. I'm leaving. I'm finding a lawyer, and You can't. The words stopped me cold. Not because of how he said them, though his voice had dropped to something soft and dangerous, but because of what happened when I tried to take another step backward. I couldn't move. My feet were frozen to the floor, my legs locked in place, my entire body refusing to obey the commands my brain was sending. It was like sleep paralysis, but I was awake, I was conscious, and I was trapped. What did you do to me? I whispered. Damien crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate, and stopped inches from where I stood frozen. He was so close I could see the individual flecks of silver in his gray eyes, the faint lines at the corners that suggested he wasn't as young as he appeared. Up close, he smelled like cedar and smoke and something else, something metallic like blood or old magic. The contract contains a proximity clause, he said. You cannot move more than 100 meters from my location without my explicit permission. Attempting to do so will trigger a temporary paralysis that will last until I release you. My voice cracked. You can't do that. That's kidnapping. That's false imprisonment. I'll call the police. I'll call them. He smiled, and it was the worst thing I'd seen yet, because there was no cruelty in it. There was only patience, only certainty. Tell them that your tech CEO boss has magically bound you to his side. Tell them you can feel the stock market in your heartbeat. Tell them you signed a contract that glowed blue and tore something out of your chest. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. That's what I thought. Damien stepped back, and suddenly I could move again. I stumbled, caught myself on the back of a chair, and stared at him with what I was sure was naked terror. I'm not your enemy, Ethan. I'm not trying to hurt you. The binding is necessary for the work we're doing, for what I'm trying to accomplish. What are you trying to accomplish? My voice was shaking, but I forced myself to stand straight, to meet his eyes. You said something about storing human consciousness, about souls. What the hell are you building up here? He was silent for a long moment, studying me with that unnerving intensity. Then he walked to one of the glass cases and unlocked it with a key that hung from a chain around his neck. Inside, resting on black velvet, was a pendant. A circle of pale gold with a symbol I didn't recognize engraved in its center. I'm trying to break a curse, he said quietly. A curse that's followed me for longer than you can imagine. He told me things then. Things that should have sounded like madness, like delusions of grandeur from a man whose wealth had insulated him from reality for too long. But the way he said them, the weight in his voice, the tiredness behind his eyes, made me want to believe him. Or maybe that was just the binding, pulsing softly in my chest, reminding me that something impossible had already happened. I was born in 1682, Damien said, in a village that no longer exists, in a country that has changed names 3 times since. I was not born Damien Voss. That name is only a few decades old. But I have been many people, Ethan. I have lived many lives. Reincarnation, I said, the word tasting strange on my tongue. Reincarnation is real, yes, but it's not supposed to work the way mine does. Most people die, and their souls move on, to something new, somewhere else, a fresh start with no memory of what came before. But I remember every life, every death, every century that passes. I'm born again into a new body, and I remember everything. I didn't have a word for what that was. Horrifying, exhilarating, impossible. How? Because of you. The words hung in the air between us, and I felt something shift in my chest. The binding, maybe, or something deeper, something older. Me, I said. I wasn't alive in 1682. I'm 29 years old. Your body is 29 years old. Damien's voice was soft now, almost gentle. But your soul, Ethan, your soul is ancient. We've known each other for centuries. We've loved each other for centuries. And we've lost each other, over and over, every time death separates us. I shook my head, backing away from him. No, I don't believe in past lives. I don't believe in soulmates. I'm a systems architect, Damien. I believe in code and servers and things I can prove. And yet your heart is beating in sync with my company's stock price. And yet you cannot walk more than 100 meters from my side. And yet, when you close your eyes at night, you dream of fire. He stepped closer, and I stepped back, until my shoulders hit the cold glass of the window. You've been dreaming of fire your whole life, haven't you? A great burning, a city in flames, a hand reaching for yours that you couldn't grasp. My breath caught in my throat, because he was right. I'd had that dream since I was a child. The same one, recurring, vivid enough that I'd once written it down in a journal to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining the consistency of it. A city burning, the sky red with smoke and ash, and a figure reaching for me through the flames. A figure whose face I could never quite see. I started, but my voice broke. London, 1666, Damien said quietly. The Great Fire. You were a merchant's son, and I was a soldier who'd been discharged after the plague took my family. We met 3 days before the fire started. We had 3 days together before the world burned, and in the chaos we were separated. I looked for you for weeks. I found your body in the ruins. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. Stop. You've worn that same face in every life, he continued, relentless now. Not exactly the same, the details change, the coloring shifts, but the shape of you is always recognizable. Your eyes, Ethan, those green eyes. I've been finding them for 350 years. Every lifetime I search for you, and every lifetime I find you, and I lose you, and I spend the rest of my years trying to find a way to make it stop. The curse, I said, remembering his earlier words. The curse. He reached out and I flinched, but he only touched my face. His fingers cool against my cheek, tracing a line down to my jaw. The first time we met, I was already what you would call a witch. I knew things. I could do things. And when you died in my arms, I made a choice. I bound my soul to yours, so that I would always find you again, so that death wouldn't be the end. You bound us together. My voice was barely a whisper. I bound myself to you. But magic is not precise, Ethan. It's not clean. The binding worked, but it worked too well. I became immortal, not truly, not in the sense that I cannot die, but in the sense that I cannot stay dead. Every time I die, I'm reborn with all my memories intact. And every time I'm reborn, I find you. And every time I find you, you don't remember me. You never remember. Something wet was sliding down my cheeks. I didn't know when I'd started crying. You expect me to believe this, I said. You expect me to just accept that I've been in love with you for centuries and I just forgot. What exactly am I building? A system. Damien's hand moved through the air above the glowing contract, and the text responded, scrolling to reveal technical specifications that made my head spin. An interface between human consciousness and digital infrastructure. The ability to store, transfer, and reconstruct the human soul within a network environment. I stared at him. That's not possible. Everything is possible, Ethan. The only question is whether you're willing to help me make it real. The contract floated there, glowing softly, waiting for me. I should have asked more questions. I should have walked away. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong, that this man was dangerous in ways I couldn't articulate, that the light in that room was the wrong color and the air was the wrong temperature and nothing about the situation was normal. But I thought about my mother, too proud to ask for help, lying in a hospital bed 3,000 miles away. I thought about the eviction notice taped to my door. I thought about the numbers, the endless, suffocating numbers that had been slowly crushing me for months. What do I need to do? I asked. Damien's smile changed, softened, almost, became something that might have been relief. Place your hand on the interface, he said. The biometric system will read your prints, your retinal pattern, your heartbeat. And then, he paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. Then we'll begin. I stepped up to the platform. The contract screen was cool beneath my palm, the blue light pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Something tingled in my fingers, spread up my arm, settled into my chest like a second pulse. Ethan Cole, the system said, and its voice was the same genderless tone as Jasmine's, but layered with something else, something ancient. Do you freely enter into this agreement, of your own will and consent? Yes. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. The terms have been presented. The compensation has been stated. The duration is 6 months, renewable at the discretion of the primary party. Do you accept these terms? I accept. The light flared, blinding white, and I felt something tear loose inside me. Not painfully, more like a thread being pulled from a piece of fabric, something that had been woven into my being for so long I'd forgotten it was there. When I could see again, the contract was gone. The platform was dark, and Damien was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read at all. Welcome to Voss Global, Ethan, he said. You belong to me now. The words should have been a joke, a figure of speech, but something in his tone made my blood run cold, because I realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that he meant them literally. And somewhere deep in my chest, where the second pulse still throbbed, something answered him. Yes, I didn't sleep that night. Voss Global had put me up in a hotel that cost more per night than my monthly rent, but I couldn't enjoy it. I lay in the king-sized bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day over and over. The glowing contract, the tearing sensation, the way Damien had looked at me when it was over. You belong to me now. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was a figure of speech, corporate jargon. The man was eccentric, brilliant people often were, and I was reading too much into things because I was sleep-deprived and overwhelmed and probably still running on the adrenaline of the past 48 hours. But when I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Those pale gray eyes, watching me like I was something precious, something he'd been waiting for. I didn't fall asleep until nearly dawn, and when I did, I dreamed of fire. Chapter 3: Ghosts in the Machine. The apartment on the 45th floor was larger than any space I'd ever lived in, but I couldn't enjoy it. I paced the length of the living room, 50 feet I counted, and tried to think. The proximity clause meant I was trapped in this building, trapped near Damien, but I could move freely within Voss Global's walls. That meant I could explore. It meant I could investigate. It meant I could find a way out. Assuming there was a way out. I spent the first 3 days doing nothing but research. The apartment had a computer, a custom-built machine that made my laptop look like a children's toy, and I used it to dig into everything I could find about Damien Voss. His official biography was polished and empty, full of vague references to early investments in emerging technologies and strategic acquisitions that didn't explain how he'd gone from nothing to one of the richest men in the world in less than 20 years. But the unofficial sources were more interesting. Old forum posts from employees who'd worked at companies Voss Global had absorbed, talking about strange requirements in their contracts. Whispers on dark web forums about the Voss condition among former employees who'd signed non-disclosure agreements so restrictive they couldn't even talk about the weather without risking legal action. And one blog, buried so deep in the internet's archives that it took me 6 hours to find, written by a woman named Dr. Elena Vasquez, who claimed to have worked in Voss Global's R&D division before disappearing under mysterious circumstances. The blog was fragmentary, written in code that I had to break line by line, but the parts one could understand made my skin crawl. The binding is real. I've seen it. Voss isn't just building technology. He's recreating ancient rituals using modern tools. The contracts, the biometric signatures, the employee integration program, it's all designed to tie people to him, to make them part of his network. He calls it the Nexus. I don't know what he's trying to achieve, but I know it's dangerous. The subjects in the lower levels, God help them, they're not employees anymore. They're components, pieces of a machine that Voss is building, and I don't think he cares if they survive the process. If you're reading this and you've signed a Voss Global contract, run. Run as far and as fast as you can. It's already too late for me. The last post was dated 3 years ago. Dr. Elena Vasquez had not been heard from since. I sat back from the computer, my heart pounding. Not from the binding this time, but from fear. The subjects in the lower levels. What lower levels? The building had 50 floors above ground, but the elevator had gone to P for penthouse. What else was down there? What was beneath Voss Global? I needed to see for myself. The elevator required authorization for anything below the lobby level, but I'd spent 3 days learning the building systems. The security architecture was impressive: layered encryption, redundant authentication protocols, a neural network that learned and adapted to threats in real time, but I was better. I'd been designing security systems since I was 16. I'd broken into systems I wasn't supposed to access more times than I could count, always with permission, always as part of a penetration test. This was different. This was real. And the stakes were higher than they'd ever been. Took me 4 hours to bypass the elevator's restrictions. Another 2 to spoof the retinal scanner into thinking I was authorized personnel. And then, finally, I was standing in an elevator that was descending to floors that didn't officially exist. B2, B3, B4. The doors opened on B5, and I stepped out into a corridor that looked like something from a science fiction movie. White walls, white floors, white ceiling, all lit with a cool blue light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air was cold and filtered, carrying a faint smell of ozone and something else. Something organic, like living tissue. I walked down the corridor, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Doors lined both walls, each one labeled with a number and a symbol I didn't recognize. Some of the doors had windows, and through them I could see rooms that looked like hospital wards. Beds, monitors, equipment I couldn't identify. And people. People lying in those beds, connected to machines by wires that disappeared into their skin. People with their eyes open, staring at nothing, their faces slack and empty. Their chests rose and fell in perfect synchrony with something, with the hum of the machines, maybe, or with each other. I pressed my hand against one of the windows, my breath fogging the glass. The person inside, a woman with dark hair and pale skin, turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were the same crystalline gray as Damien's. She smiled, and then she spoke, her voice coming not from her mouth but from speakers in the corridor, layered and distorted and somehow wrong. "Hello, Ethan. We've been waiting for you." I stumbled backward, hitting the opposite wall. "What? Who are you?" "We are the Nexus," the voice said. "We are the ones who came before. We are the price of immortality." The woman in the room tilted her head, and the movement was too smooth, too synchronized with something I couldn't see. Her smile widened, and I saw that her teeth were stained with something dark. "You signed the contract," she continued. "You felt the binding. Soon you will join us. You will become part of the machine. Part of him. There is no escape, Ethan Cole. There is only acceptance." "No." I was running before I finished the word, sprinting back down the corridor toward the elevator. "No, no, no." The doors were closing. I threw myself through them just as they shut, landing hard on the elevator floor as the car began to rise. My hands were shaking, my breath ragged, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might tear itself out of my chest. The elevator stopped at the lobby, and the doors opened onto bright light and polished marble and the normal sounds of a corporate headquarters. People in business attire walked past without looking at me. A woman at the reception desk smiled and asked if I needed assistance. I needed to get out. I needed to run. I needed to. "Ethan." Damien's voice came from everywhere at once, echoing through the lobby, through the elevator, through the very bones of the building. People stopped walking. Heads turned. The receptionist's smile froze on her face. "You found the lower levels," Damien said, and now I could see him at the far end of the lobby, walking toward me with that predator's grace. "I was hoping you'd wait a little longer before discovering them." "What are they?" My voice came out as a croak. "What are those people?" "Subjects." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw, the tightness around his eyes. "Volunteers, all of them. They signed contracts just like you. They agreed to be part of something greater than themselves. They're zombies, Damien. Their eyes. They have your eyes. The binding changes people. He said it simply, without shame or apology. The longer someone is connected to the nexus, the more they become part of me. Their consciousness merges with the network. Their identity dissolves. Eventually, they become extensions of my will. I felt sick. You're building an army, a hive mind. I'm building a solution. His voice was sharp now, cutting through my panic. The curse that binds us, Ethan. It's not just about reincarnation. It's about fragmentation. Every time I die and am reborn, pieces of me are left behind. Pieces of my soul. The nexus is a way to recover those pieces. To reintegrate what was lost. By destroying other people? By asking them to help. He stepped closer, and this time I didn't step back. Couldn't. The binding held me in place, my feet rooted to the marble floor. The volunteers knew what they were signing up for. They were dying, cancer, organ failure, degenerative diseases. I offered them a choice. Die as themselves or become part of something that would outlast their individual existence. They chose the nexus. They chose me. That's not a choice. That's coercion. That's survival. He was inches from me now, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. You think I enjoy this? You think I wanted to spend centuries building a machine that consumes human souls? I did it because there was no other way. The curse is older than any technology, any magic, any god. Cannot be broken, can only be redirected. And what happens to me? I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. Am I going to end up in one of those beds? Am I going to become part of your hive mind? Damien's expression shifted. Something cracked in that marble facade. Something raw and vulnerable that I hadn't seen before. No, he said quietly. Never you. The binding I placed on you is different. Special. You're not a volunteer, Ethan. You're not a subject. He paused, searching for words. You're the reason for all of this. The nexus exists to save you. To save us. I would never. Don't. I held up a hand and he stopped. Don't tell me you're doing this for me. Don't make me responsible for whatever nightmare you've built down there. I'm not trying to make you responsible. I'm trying to make you understand. He reached for my hand, and I let him take it. Not because I wanted to, but because I was too exhausted to pull away. His fingers were warm, his grip gentle. You've seen the lower levels now. You've seen what I'm capable of. And still, you haven't run. You haven't screamed. You haven't called the police or tried to break the contract. I can't run. You made sure of that. You could try. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You could scream. You could fight. But you're not doing any of those things because some part of you, some deep buried part, remembers. You've seen this before, Ethan. In other lifetimes. And every time you stayed. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. That I was staying because I had no choice. Because I was trapped and terrified and completely out of my depth. But my hand was still in his, and the binding in my chest had gone quiet. And when I closed my eyes, I didn't see the fire. I saw a battlefield. Mud and blood and screaming horses. A hand reaching for mine through the chaos. A voice saying my name. Not Ethan, but something else, something older, and the overwhelming relief of being found. When I opened my eyes, Damien was watching me with an expression I couldn't name. Hope, maybe, or fear. What did you see? He asked. Something I don't want to remember, I said. And then, because I couldn't help myself, because the binding was pulling at something deep in my chest, I added, but I think I'm going to remember it anyway. Chapter 4. Memories of Ashen Iron. That night, the dreams came back. But they were different this time. Sharper. More real. I am standing in a field of wheat, golden stalks swaying in a warm breeze. The sun is setting behind a line of hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Someone is beside me. A man with dark hair and gray eyes, wearing simple clothes that look like they belong in a history book. It's beautiful, I say, And my voice is not my own. It's deeper, rougher, with an accent I've never heard. Not as beautiful as you, the man replies, and his voice is Damien's, unmistakably Damien's, even though his face is different. Younger, softer, not yet carved into the sharp mask I know. I laugh, and the sound is unfamiliar. You're ridiculous. I'm in love. He takes my hand, and his fingers are calloused, rough from work I don't understand. There's a difference. I lean into him, and the wheat rustles around us, and for a moment, just a moment, everything is perfect. Then the sky goes dark. I woke gasping, my sheets tangled around my legs, my heart pounding in a rhythm that felt like a warning. The dream was already fading, slipping through my fingers like water, but fragments remained. Wheat, sunlight, hands intertwined. A name, whispered in a voice that wasn't mine. Aldrich. I sat up, pressing my palms against my eyes. Aldrich. That was the name from the dream. That was the name Damien had called me. In that voice that wasn't quite his, on that battlefield that smelled of mud and blood. My name. My other name. The one I'd worn in a life I couldn't remember living. The binding throbbed in my chest, warm and insistent, and I knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with logic or evidence, that the dreams were going to get worse before they got better. That I was going to remember everything, whether I wanted to or not. I got dressed and went looking for answers. Damien's penthouse was empty when I arrived, but I found him in a room I hadn't seen before. A library, lined floor to ceiling with books that looked older than most countries. He was sitting in a leather armchair by a fire that burned without wood or smoke, reading something in a language I didn't recognize. "You're up early," he said without looking at me. I had a dream that got his attention. He closed the book, gently, reverently, like it was made of glass, and looked at me with those pale gray eyes. What kind of dream? A memory. I walked to the fireplace, warming my hands against flames that gave off no heat. A field of wheat, a sunset. You called me Aldrich. Something shifted in Damien's expression. Pain, maybe, or longing. That was our first life together. The one that started everything. Aldrich. I tested the name on my tongue, and it felt right in a way that made my stomach clench. Who was he? Who was I? Damien was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost reverent. Aldrich was a farmer's son. He lived in a small village in what is now Germany, in the year 1682. He had your eyes, those same green eyes, like spring leaves after rain. And he had your stubbornness, your intelligence, your refusal to accept the world as it was presented to him. And you? Who were you? I was a traveler, a seeker. I'd been studying with a wise woman in the mountains, learning things that the church would have burned me for knowing. I passed through Aldrich's village on my way home, and I saw him working in the fields, and Damien paused, a muscle working in his jaw. I stopped breathing. That's the only way I can describe it. I saw him and I stopped breathing, because I knew that my life before that moment had been nothing but waiting to find him. That's intense for a first meeting. That's the binding. He stood, walking to one of the bookshelves and running his fingers along the spines. Even then, before I'd done the ritual, we were drawn to each other. Some connections are older than magic. Older than time, maybe. I don't know. I've never been able to explain it. How long did you have together? 3 months. His voice was flat, emptied of emotion. 3 months of happiness, and then the soldiers came. There was a war. There's always a war in every century somewhere, and they swept through the village, conscripting every able-bodied man. Aldrich was taken. I followed. I fought beside him, and on a muddy field in a country that no longer exists, I watched him die. The fire flickered, and I realized I was crying. Silent tears sliding down my cheeks, dripping onto the collar of my shirt. I held him, Damien continued. I held him as the light left his eyes, and I felt something break inside me, something fundamental, and I made a choice, a stupid, desperate, impossible choice. I bound my soul to his, so that I would find him again, so that death wouldn't be the end. But it wasn't just your soul you bound, I said, remembering the blog. It was his too. You tied us together. I tied myself to him, to you. The magic was supposed to work one way. I would always find you, but you would be free, unbound, able to live your lives without the weight of centuries dragging you down. He turned to face me, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. But magic is never precise, Ethan. It's never clean. The binding worked, but it worked on both of us. My immortality became your curse. Your death became my obsession. The lower levels. I stepped closer to him, driven by something I couldn't name. The nexus. You're trying to fix it. I'm trying to end it. His voice cracked on the last word, and I saw something I'd never expected to see on Damien Voss's face. Despair. Every lifetime, I tell myself I'll find another way. Every lifetime I fail. I build technology and learn magic and sacrifice pieces of my soul, and nothing works. Nothing brings you back to me as anything more than a stranger who doesn't remember my name. But I'm starting to remember. The words came out before I could stop them. The dreams, they're getting clearer, stronger. I saw your face in the wheat field. I heard you call my name. Damien's breath caught. You're remembering faster than anyone ever has. Chapter 5. The Architecture of Forever. The days that followed blurred together into a haze of memories, conversations, and discoveries that reshaped everything I thought I knew about reality. Damien showed me his archives, a vast underground repository beneath Voss Global that contained records of every lifetime he could remember. Journals written in dozens of languages, photographs from the earliest days of photography, paintings and drawings and sculptures he'd commissioned over the centuries, all featuring the same face. My face, my eyes, my smile, the particular way I tilted my head when I was thinking. Obsession is a mild word for it, I said, looking at a portrait from 1852 that showed a young man with dark hair and green eyes, dressed in the clothes of a Victorian gentleman. This is extensive. This is nothing. Damien stood beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. I have warehouses full of things I've collected over the centuries. Artifacts, keepsakes, things that belong to you in other lives. I couldn't bear to throw any of them away. That's not healthy, Damien. I know. He said it simply, without defensiveness. I'm not healthy, Ethan. I've spent 350 years grieving the same person over and over again. I've watched you die in more ways than I can count. I've held your body in my arms while your blood soaked into my clothes. And then I've spent decades searching for your soul in a new body, hoping, praying, that this time would be different. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw past the intimidating exterior to the exhausted, desperate man beneath. The lines around his eyes weren't from smiling. The tension in his jaw wasn't from stress. They were from centuries of loss, carved into a face that had worn too many names and mourned too many deaths. I'm sorry, I said quietly, for all of it, for dying, for making you watch, for... Don't. He turned to face me, his expression fierce. Don't apologize for dying. It was never your fault. The curse, the bindings, the endless cycle, that's on me. I'm the one who couldn't let go. I'm the one who keeps pulling you back. You keep finding me. I reached out, tracing my fingers along his jaw. There's a difference. He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch like a man starving for contact. I keep finding you because I can't stop, because every time I die and am reborn, the first thing I do is look for your face in every crowd. The first thing I think is, where is he? Is he safe? Does he remember anything this time? And now, he opened his eyes, and they were wet. And now you're here, in front of me, and you're starting to remember, and I'm terrified. He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. I'm terrified that this time will be like all the others, that you'll remember enough to love me, and then you'll die, and I'll be alone again. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. No, I admitted, but I know that I'm tired of running. I'm tired of fighting the binding, of pretending I don't feel this pull between us. I signed that contract because I needed money, but I stayed because I paused, searching for words. Because when I'm near you, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. Like some part of me that's been lost for a very long time finally came home. Damien made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and pulled me into his arms. He held me tightly, his face buried in my hair, his body shaking with emotion he'd probably been suppressing for centuries. "I love you," he whispered. "I've loved you since the first moment I saw you in that wheat field, and I've never stopped. Not through all the deaths, all the separations, all the lifetimes when you looked at me like a stranger. I love you, Ethan. I love you. And I'm sorry for everything I've done to keep you." I held him back, my arms around his waist, my face pressed against his chest. His heart was beating beneath my ear. Not in sync with the stock market, I realized, but with something else. Something older. Something that felt like my own. That night I dreamed of all of them. Aldrich, the farmer's son, who died on a muddy battlefield with Damien's name on his lips. Marcus, the sailor, who drowned in a storm off the coast of Ireland while Damien watched from the shore. Julian, the artist, who burned in a fire that consumed his studio and everything he'd ever painted. Leo, the doctor, who died of plague while trying to save his patients, Damien's hand in his as the fever took him. Sasha, the soldier, who fell in a war that had no name, in a country that no longer existed. Theo, the teacher, who was murdered in the street for the crime of loving the wrong person. 18 lives, 18 deaths, 18 times that Damien had held me as I slipped away, and 18 times that he'd sworn to find me again. When I woke, my pillow was wet with tears. I found Damien in his penthouse, standing by the windows and watching the sunrise paint the Seattle skyline in shades of gold and pink. He didn't turn when I entered, but I saw his shoulders tense. "I dreamed about them," I said. "All of them. All the people I used to be. And I understand now." I walked to stand beside him, looking out at the city waking up below us. "I understand why you built all of this. The contract, the nexus, the binding. You weren't trying to trap me. You were trying to save me. I was trying to save us." He turned to face me, and his expression was raw, unguarded in a way I'd never seen before. "Every lifetime, I tell myself I'll find another way. Every lifetime I fail. But this time, with the technology, with the resources I've accumulated, I thought maybe I could finally break the cycle." "Can you?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I don't know. The curse is older than any magic I've encountered. It's woven into the fabric of our souls, into the very nature of reincarnation. I've spent centuries trying to undo what I did on that battlefield, and I'm no closer to an answer than I was the day Aldrich died." "Then stop trying." Damien blinked. "What?" "Stop trying to break the curse." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. "Stop trying to fix the past. Stop trying to control the future. Just be here, with me, now." "Ethan, I'm not saying I've forgiven you for the contract or the binding, or the fact that I can't leave this building without you. I'm furious about all of that, and we're going to have a very long conversation about consent and personal autonomy." I squeezed his fingers. "But I'm tired of fighting what's between us. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this pull. For 350 years, we've been doing the same thing over and over. You searching, me dying, both of us miserable. Maybe it's time to try something different." Damien stared at me, his gray eyes wide, and I saw hope flickering behind the exhaustion. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we stop worrying about forever and start focusing on now." I stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. "I'm suggesting we figure out who we are together, in this lifetime, without the weight of all the others dragging us down. I'm suggesting." He kissed me before I could finish. It was different from the first kiss. Slower, sweeter. His hands cradled my face like I was something precious, something he was afraid would break. His lips moved against mine with a gentleness that made my chest ache. And when he pulled back, his eyes were shining. "I've waited centuries to hear you say that," he whispered. "To hear you choose me, not because of the binding or the curse or the memories, but because you want to." "I do want to." I pressed my forehead against his. God help me, I do. Chapter 6, Cracks in the Foundation. Of course, it couldn't last. The tentative, fragile hope that we'd finally found a way forward. The universe, or the curse, or whatever malevolent force had been fucking with our lives for centuries, wasn't going to let us have happiness that easily. It started with a headache. I was in the apartment on the 45th floor working on the Nexus code because despite everything, I was still under contract, and the work still needed to be done when a sharp pain lanced through my skull. I dropped my coffee mug, and it shattered on the marble floor, but I barely noticed because the pain was spreading, radiating down my spine, settling into my chest like a hot coal. Ethan. The voice was Damien's, but it wasn't coming from outside me. It was inside my head, echoing through the binding, layered with static and distortion. Damien? I thought back, not sure if he could hear me. What's happening? The Nexus. Something's wrong. I need you. His voice cut off abruptly, replaced by a wave of nausea that drove me to my knees. I crawled to the door, pulling myself up using the frame, and stumbled into the hallway. The elevator was too far. I couldn't make it that far. Instead, I ran. The proximity clause meant I could only move within a certain radius of Damien, but that radius included most of the building. As long as he was in the tower, I could reach him. And right now, every instinct I had was screaming that he needed me. I found him in the Nexus chamber. The room was chaos. The machines that lined the walls were sparking, smoke rising from their circuits, and the people in the beds, the subjects, the volunteers, the components of Damien's network were screaming. Not with their mouths, but with their minds. The sound was unbearable. 1,000 voices crying out in pain and terror, all of them layered on top of each other in a discordant symphony of agony. Damien was at the center of the room, his hands pressed against the main console, his body rigid. His eyes were closed, his face was pale, and blood was trickling from his nose. Damien! I ran to him, grabbing his shoulders. Damien, what's happening? The binding, he gasped, not opening his eyes. Someone's attacking the binding, trying to break it. Who? I don't. He convulsed, and the blood from his nose turned into a flood, pouring down his face, dripping onto his white shirt. Ethan, I can't. The feedback is too strong. What do I do? He opened his eyes, and they were wild, panicked, nothing like the controlled mask I was used to. The Nexus is connected to me, to my soul. If someone breaks the binding, it won't just free you, it will kill me. And everyone connected to the network. I looked around the room at the screaming subjects, at the sparking machines, at the man who had spent centuries searching for me. And I made a choice. Tell me how to help you. There's a failsafe in the system. A kill switch. If you can access it, you can shut down the Nexus before the attack destroys everything. Where is it? Lower level 7. Behind the door marked with a white star. You'll need my biometric signature to open it. I grabbed his hand, pressing his thumb to the console scanner. Will that work? It should. He swayed, and I caught him, lowering him to the floor. Ethan, if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. Do you hear me? Nothing. We've survived 350 years of this bullshit. We're not going to die today. He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. You sound like you believe that. I do. I kissed him quick and hard, tasting blood. Stay alive until I get back. Then I ran. Lower level 7 was deeper than I'd ever been, past the floors with the hospital rooms, past the doors that were labeled with symbols I didn't recognize, past the point where the air turned cold and thin and strange. The corridor was dark, lit only by emergency lights that flickered with the same unsteady rhythm as my heartbeat. The door with the white star was at the end of the corridor, massive and metallic, sealed with a lock that required both a biometric signature and something else. Something that looked like a handprint scanner but glowed with the same blue light as the contract I'd signed. I pressed Damien's thumb to the scanner, and the door slid open. The room beyond was small, barely larger than a closet, dominated by a single pedestal. On the pedestal rested a sphere of black glass, about the size of my fist, with symbols carved into its surface that pulsed with light. The failsafe, I approached it slowly, my heart pounding. The symbols on the sphere were the same ones I'd seen in the contract. The same ones carved into the pendant Damien wore around his neck. The language of the binding. The language of the curse. Ethan. I spun around, but there was no one there. The voice was coming from the sphere itself, soft, feminine, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. "Who are you?" I asked. "I am the one who bound you." The voice was calm, almost amused. "I am the one who created the curse, who tied your souls together, who set this cycle in motion 350 years ago. I am the witch Damien studied with in the mountains. And I am very, very disappointed in him." The sphere pulsed, and suddenly I wasn't in the room anymore. I was in a forest, ancient and dark, with trees that towered above me and a sky that was the wrong color, purple and green like a bruise. And standing in front of me, dressed in robes that seemed to be made of shadows, was a woman with silver hair and eyes that held no pupils at all. "You?" I breathed. "Me." She smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Damien's little apprentice. The one who taught him everything he knows. The one he betrayed when he performed the binding ritual without my permission." Betrayed. The binding was supposed to be temporary. A few decades, long enough for him to grieve and move on. But Damien was arrogant. He thought he knew better than I did. He made the binding permanent, eternal, and in doing so, he cursed both of you to an endless cycle of death and reunion. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You're the one who created the curse?" "I created the ritual. Damien created the curse, through his stubbornness and his refusal to let go." She stepped closer, and the shadows around her writhed like living things. "And now, after centuries of watching him destroy countless lives in his quest to undo his mistake, I've decided to intervene. The binding is going to break, Ethan. Not the way Damien wants, not cleanly, not safely. It's going to shatter, and when it does, everyone connected to it will die. Everyone. You, him, the subjects in the Nexus. Everyone whose soul has been touched by Damien's magic." She tilted her head, studying me with those empty eyes. "Unless, of course, you can convince me to spare them. What do you want?" "I want what I've always wanted." She reached out, and her hand passed through my chest, touching something I couldn't see. "I want Damien to suffer the way I suffered when he left. I want him to understand what it means to lose everything." I grabbed her wrist, or tried to. My hand passed through her like smoke. "You're not going to kill innocent people because you're bitter about being rejected." Her expression flickered. Something like surprise crossed her face. There and gone. "You're different from the others," she said slowly. "The other incarnations of his beloved. You're harder, more stubborn. I'm a systems architect from New York who's been evicted, bankrupt, and generally fucked over by life more times than I can count." I met her empty eyes without flinching. "You're going to have to try harder than that to scare me." She laughed. A genuine laugh, surprised and almost delighted. "Oh, I like you. I like you very much. Which is a shame, because I'm still going to destroy everything you care about." And then she was gone, and I was back in the small room with the sphere, and the sphere was cracking. Chapter 7. The Weight of Choice. I ran back to the Nexus chamber with the cracked sphere in my hands, the symbols on its surface flickering like dying stars. The corridor was darker now, the emergency lights failing one by one, and the screams from the subjects were louder, more desperate. Damien was where I'd left him, slumped against the console, his face pale and streaked with blood. But his eyes were open, and they tracked me as I entered. "You found the failsafe," he said, his voice weak. "I found something else too." I knelt beside him, holding up the sphere. "The witch. She's behind the attack. She wants to break the binding permanently. She says it will kill everyone connected to it." Damien's face went even paler, if that was possible. No, that's not possible. The binding can't be broken that way. It's woven into our souls. Apparently it can be broken that way, and apparently she's been waiting centuries for the opportunity. I turned the sphere over in my hands, watching the cracks spread. "She said you betrayed her." That you performed the binding ritual without her permission. I did. Damien closed his eyes. I was young. I was grieving. I didn't care about the consequences, only about finding you again. She told me the binding was dangerous, that it could have unforeseen side effects. I didn't listen. You never listen, I said. But there was no heat in it. That's kind of your thing, isn't it? Ignoring warnings, pushing forward despite the risks, refusing to accept that some things can't be fixed. I'm trying to change. I know. I set the sphere on the floor between us, watching it pulse with dying light. But we have a more immediate problem. She's going to break the binding, and when she does, we all die. Unless we can find a way to stop her. The failsafe. Damien reached for the sphere, his fingers hovering over its cracked surface. It's not just a kill switch for the Nexus. It's a link to her, to the original ritual. If I can access it, I might be able to reverse the binding, not break it, but change it. Make it something new. Something that doesn't kill everyone? Something that doesn't kill anyone. He met my eyes, and despite everything, the blood, the pain, the imminent destruction, there was a spark of hope in his gaze. It's risky. I don't know if I can do it alone. You're not alone. I placed my hand over his, pressing our palms together against the sphere. Show me what to do. The magic, if that's what it was, felt like code. That's the only way I can describe it. When Damien's consciousness touched mine through the sphere, I saw the binding not as a mystical force or a supernatural curse, but as a system. A complex, interconnected network of conditions and dependencies and feedback loops, built on rules that were older than any programming language but followed the same logical principles. Do you see it? Damien's voice echoed in my mind, layered with the same static I'd heard earlier but softer now. The structure of the binding? I see it. I traced the connections with my mental fingers, following threads that led from Damien's soul to mine, from mine to the Nexus, from the Nexus to the subjects in their beds. It's beautiful, in a terrifying, this should not exist kind of way. I built it over centuries, added to it, modified it, tried to fix the parts that were broken. His presence beside me in the mind space was warm, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. But I couldn't see the core problem, the original flaw. The witch. The witch. His mental voice was bitter. She built the ritual to be dependent on her will. As long as she existed, the binding could never truly be free. Then we cut her out. I reached for the threads that led away from the sphere, following them through the network until I found what I was looking for. A knot of connections, twisted and dark, that pulsed with the same purple-green light as the witch's eyes. We isolate her influence and reroute the binding through something else. Through what? I thought about it. About the contract I'd signed, glowing blue on that platform. About the biometric signatures that had bound me to Voss Global. About the technology Damien had spent centuries building, designed to interface with human consciousness. Through the Nexus, I said, not as a replacement for her, but as a foundation. We transfer the binding from her will to the system's architecture. Make it something that can be controlled, monitored, maintained. You're talking about turning a curse into software. I'm a systems architect. I felt myself smile, even in the mind space. It's what I do. Damien was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, his presence shifted beside me, moving from despair to something else. Something that felt like hope. Show me how. We worked together for what felt like hours, though I suspected no time was passing in the physical world. Damien guided me through the structure of the binding, explaining the rules that governed it, the dependencies that kept it functioning, the feedback loops that made it self-sustaining. And I, in turn, showed him how to translate that structure into code, how to build interfaces and APIs, how to create redundancies and fail-safes, how to design a system that could evolve and adapt without breaking. It was the most intimate thing I'd ever done. More intimate than kissing, more intimate than sex, more intimate than anything I could have imagined. Our minds were intertwined, our thoughts flowing back and forth without barriers, our emotions mingling until I couldn't tell where I ended and Damien began. I love you, he thought, and I felt the words echo through every part of me. I know. I thought back. I love you too. Now focus, we're almost there. The witch's knot was unraveling. Thread by thread, connection by connection, we were pulling her influence out of the binding and replacing it with our own architecture. The nexus hummed beneath us, responding to the changes, adapting to its new role as the foundation of a centuries-old curse. It's working, Damien said, and there was wonder in his voice. Ethan, it's actually working. Don't celebrate yet. I reached for the final thread, the one that connected the binding to the witch herself, and hesitated. Once I cut this, she'll know. She'll fight back. Then we'd better be ready. I cut the thread. The backlash was immediate and violent. The witch's presence flooded the mind space, furious and terrible, her form coalescing from the shadows between connections. Her eyes blazed with purple light, and her voice was a scream that shattered the fragile architecture we just built. Traitors, betrayers, you think you can escape me? I felt Damien's consciousness brace against the assault, felt his pain as the witch's rage tore through him. But I also felt something else, the nexus responding to the threat. The subjects, the volunteers, the people who had given themselves to Damien's cause, were fighting back. Their minds were battered and broken, but they were still there, still present, still willing. Help us, I thought, reaching out to them. Please, help us stop her. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the network came alive. The subjects' minds reached out, not as individuals but as a collective, a chorus of voices that had been silenced for too long. They didn't have Damien's power or my understanding of the binding, but they had something else. Sheer, stubborn, desperate will. We're tired, one voice said. The woman I'd seen on B5, the one who had spoken to me through the speakers. We're tired of being used, tired of being pieces in someone else's game. Then help us end it, I thought back. Help us build something new. The chorus swelled, and the witch screamed again. But this time, there was fear in her voice. The subjects were pushing back, their collective will pressing against her influence, weakening her hold on the binding. Now, Damien, I shouted. Seal the connection. He moved faster than I could follow, his consciousness tracing the final threads of the binding, weaving them into the nexus architecture we'd built. The witch fought him every step of the way, but she was outnumbered. One ancient spirit against a network of hundreds, all of them united by a single purpose. This isn't over, she snarled, her form dissolving into shadows. I will find you again. I will destroy everything you love. This isn't. Yes, it is, I thought, and I severed the last thread. The witch's presence vanished, and the mind space went silent. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the floor of the nexus chamber, staring up at a ceiling that was no longer sparking or smoking. The machines were quiet, the subjects were quiet, and Damien was lying beside me, his hand in mine, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Did it work? I asked, my voice hoarse. Damien turned his head to look at me, and his eyes were different, lighter. The tension that had been carved into his face for centuries was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen before. Peace. It worked, he said. The binding is still there, but it's different now. It's not a curse anymore. It's a connection. Cleaner. Freer. He squeezed my hand. You can leave the building now. The proximity clause is gone. I blinked. What? I rewrote the binding just like you said. Removed the restrictions, the compulsions, the parts that took away your autonomy. You're not trapped anymore, Ethan. You can go anywhere you want. I should have been relieved. I should have been planning my escape, my flight back to New York, my return to a life that didn't involve impossible magic and centuries-old curses, and a man who had spent 350 years searching for me. But all I felt was an overwhelming, inexplicable sadness. What if I don't want to go? I asked quietly. Damien's breath caught. What? I said. What if I don't want to go? I rolled onto my side, facing him, still holding his hand. What if I want to stay? What if I want to see what we can build together, now that the curse isn't trying to kill us? Ethan, his voice cracked. You can't be serious. After everything I've done, The contract, the binding, the way I trapped you. You can't possibly want to stay. I can. I reached out, touching his face, tracing the line of his jaw. I spent my whole life running, Damien. From debt, from responsibility, from the feeling that something was missing and I didn't know how to find it. But I'm not missing anything anymore. I found it. I found you. He stared at me for a long moment, his gray eyes bright with tears. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe, and buried his face in my hair. I don't deserve this, he whispered. I don't deserve you. Probably not, I agreed, wrapping my arms around him. But I'm giving myself to you anyway, so you'd better make it worth my while. He laughed. A real laugh, surprised and joyful and heartbreakingly young, and kissed me. And in that kiss, I felt the binding pulse between us, not as a chain or a curse, but as something new, something like a promise. Chapter 8. Unraveling. The weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. We told the world that the technical difficulties at Voss Global had been resolved, that the system was stable, that there was nothing to see here. Move along. Jasmine Reyes handled the media with her characteristic efficiency, deflecting questions about the power fluctuations and the screams that had been heard in the lower levels with a smile that could freeze water. The subjects in the Nexus were recovering. That was the word Damien used, though I wasn't sure it was accurate. They were no longer connected to the binding in the same way. The transfer of the curse's foundation had freed them from the hive mind, returning their individual consciousnesses. But they were changed, different. Most of them had been in the network for years, their minds shaped by the experience in ways that couldn't be undone. The woman on B5, her name was Miriam, she told me, and she'd been a software engineer before a degenerative nerve disease had brought her to Voss Global, was the most vocal of the group. You gave us a choice, she said. Sitting in the common room we'd set up on B4, her gray eyes, still Damien's gray, still marked by the binding, fixed on me with unsettling intensity. That's more than most people get in this world. But now we have to figure out who we are, after everything that's happened. That's not going to be easy. I know. I sat across from her, trying not to fidget. I'm not going to pretend I understand what you've been through, but I want to help. Whatever you need. Resources, support, someone to listen. I'll make sure you have it. Miriam studied me for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. You're different from him, she said. Damien, he always saw us as components, parts of his plan. But you look at us and see people. Because you are people. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. And you deserve better than to be treated like spare parts. She laughed. A dry, rasping sound that was probably the closest she could get to genuine amusement. I like you, Ethan Cole. I think you might be exactly what Damien needs. I'm not sure anyone can be exactly what Damien needs, I said honestly. But I'm willing to try. The work on the Nexus continued. Now that the binding was no longer a curse, or at least no longer a curse that was actively trying to kill everyone, I could focus on the technical aspects of the system without the constant pressure of impending doom. And there was a lot of work to do. The architecture was a mess, patched together over centuries by someone who understood magic better than code. My job was to clean it up, to build interfaces that would allow the Nexus to function without consuming the people connected to it. Damien watched me work sometimes, standing in the doorway of my office with an expression I couldn't read. I'd catch him staring, and he'd look away, almost sheepish, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. You don't have to hover, I said one evening, not looking up from my screen. I'm not going to disappear. I know. He crossed the room, stopping behind my chair. His hands came to rest on my shoulders, warm and solid. I'm just not used to this. To what? To you being here, willingly, without the binding forcing you to stay. I saved my work and turned to face him, pulling him down so he was sitting on the edge of my desk. Damien, I've told you, I'm not going anywhere. Not because I'm trapped, but because I don't want to leave. But why? The question was raw, honest, stripped of the control he usually wrapped around himself. I'm not. I've done terrible things, Ethan. I've hurt people. I've used them. I built a machine that consumed souls because I was too selfish to let go of the past. You also spent 350 years searching for the person you loved. I reached up, cupping his face in my hands. You made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but you're trying to fix them. That counts for something. Does it? It counts for everything. I pulled him down, kissing him softly. Now stop moping and help me debug this protocol. The temporal syncing is still off by 17 milliseconds, and it's driving me crazy. He laughed. That surprised, joyful sound that I was starting to hear more often, and settled in beside me, his shoulder pressed against mine, his presence warm and steady. We worked until dawn, and when the sun rose over Seattle, flooding the office with golden light, I leaned my head against Damien's shoulder and felt, for the first time in my life, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Chapter 9, The Shape of Forever. The dreams continued, but they changed. Instead of fire and death and desperate separations, I dreamed of quiet moments. A hand held in a garden. A shared meal at a wooden table. A night spent watching stars fall from the sky. Two bodies curled together for warmth. I was remembering not just the endings, but the beginnings, the middle parts, the thousands of small, precious moments that made up a life shared with someone you loved. When I woke from those dreams, I felt not grief, but gratitude. For the time we'd had, for the time we would have. And for the first time, I understood what Damien had been trying to create all those centuries ago when he'd performed the binding ritual on that muddy battlefield. He hadn't been trying to trap me. He'd been trying to save us. To preserve something that should have been lost to death and time and the cruel randomness of the universe. It had gone wrong. Terribly, horrifically wrong. But the impulse behind it, the desperate, aching need to hold on to the person you loved, was something I could understand. I understood it more and more the longer I stayed. One night, about 2 months after we'd rewired the binding, I found Damien in the library, staring at a portrait I hadn't seen before. It was a painting of Aldrich, my first self, the farmer's son, standing in that wheat field I'd dreamed about. The sunset behind him was the same gold and pink I remembered, and his expression was one of quiet contentment, like he was exactly where he wanted to be. That's the only painting of him that survived, Damien said without turning around. I commissioned it a few months before he died. The artist was supposed to paint both of us, but we ran out of time. I walked to stand beside him, looking up at the portrait. Aldrich had my eyes, my smile, the same way of tilting his head that I'd never realized was a habit until I saw it on someone else's face. He looks happy, I said. He was. Damien's voice was soft. We both were. Those 3 months were the best of my life. Until now. Until now. He turned to face me, and his expression was open, vulnerable. Nothing like the cold mask I'd first seen in his penthouse. I've spent centuries chasing a memory, he said, trying to recapture something I lost. But you're not Aldrich, Ethan. You're not Marcus or Julian or any of the others. You're you. And you've given me something I never thought I'd have. What's that? A future. He reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine. Not a repetition of the past, not an attempt to recreate what I lost, but something new, something we're building together. I squeezed his hand, my heart swelling in my chest. That's all I've ever wanted, Damien. Not to be someone else's second chance. Just to be enough. You're more than enough. He pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me, and I rested my head against his chest. You're everything. We stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the library full of memories, and I felt the binding pulse between us. Not as a curse, not as a chain, but as a heartbeat. Our heartbeat. Chapter 10. The Unbinding. The final confrontation with the witch came on a stormy night in November. The rain was lashing against the windows of Damien's penthouse, the wind howling like something alive, when the lights flickered and died. I was alone. Damien had gone to check on the subjects to make sure the nexus was stable, and I knew with a sick certainty that she was back. Ethan. Her voice came from everywhere at once, echoing through the darkness. I spun around, my heart pounding, but I couldn't see her. Show yourself, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She stepped out of the shadows near the fireplace, and she looked different from before. Smaller, less formidable. Her silver hair was dull, her empty eyes flickering with something that might have been exhaustion. "You've changed the binding," she said. "I can feel it. The connection between us is gone. We cut you out." I noticed. She walked toward me, and I held my ground, refusing to retreat. "You have no idea what you've done, Ethan Cole. The binding was the only thing keeping me anchored to this world. Without it, I'm fading, dying." "I'm sorry for that," I said, and I meant it. But the binding was hurting people. It was hurting Damien. It was hurting me. The binding was mine. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw past the ancient power to the woman beneath. A woman who had been rejected, abandoned, left behind by someone she loved. I created it. I nurtured it. I made Damien who he is, and he threw me away, like I was nothing. "He didn't throw you away." I stepped closer, close enough to see the tears sliding down her cheeks. "He outgrew you. He moved on. That's not betrayal. That's just life. You don't understand." "Maybe not." I reached out, and this time, when my hand touched her shoulder, it didn't pass through. She was solid, real, human. "But I know what it's like to be left behind, to feel like the world is moving on without you, to be so desperate to hold onto something that you'll do anything to keep it." She stared at me, her empty eyes suddenly not so empty. "How do you bear it?" "I don't know." I thought about my mother, still in that hospital bed 3,000 miles away. About the apartment I'd been evicted from, the debts I still owed, the life I'd left behind in New York. I just keep going, one day at a time. Eventually, the pain fades. Eventually, you find something new. And if you don't want something new, then you learn to want it. I squeezed her shoulder. Or you don't, and you stay miserable forever. The choice is yours. She was silent for a long moment, the rain hammering against the windows, the wind howling. Then slowly she nodded. "I'll try," she said, "to move on, to find something new." She looked at me, and her eyes had color now, a pale, watery blue. "But I can't promise anything. That's all any of us can do." I stepped back, and she faded. Not into shadows, but into light, dissolving like mist in the morning sun. The lights flickered back on. The wind died down, and Damien was standing in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide. "Ethan," he said, "what happened?" I crossed the room and pulled him into my arms, holding him tightly. "She's gone," I said. "For real this time. The binding is finally free." Damien's arms came around me, and I felt his body shake with silent sobs. I held him through it, stroking his hair, murmuring nonsense words, letting him grieve for everything he'd lost, and everything he'd finally, impossibly, gained. 6 months later, I stood on the roof of Voss Global, watching the sun set over the Seattle skyline. The contract was over, officially at least. The 6 months had passed, the milestones had been met, and the $10 million was sitting in my bank account, waiting for me to decide what to do with it. Behind me, the door to the roof opened, and Damien stepped out into the fading light. "You're thinking about leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm thinking about a lot of things." I didn't turn around, but I felt him move to stand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. "My mother's better. The surgery worked. She's asking when I'm coming to visit. You should go." "I will." I turned to face him, and his expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the fear behind his eyes. "But I'm coming back." "Are you?" "Damien." I reached for his hand, lacing our fingers together. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere. Not because of the binding, not because of the contract, not because of anything except—" I paused, searching for words. "Except that I love you. I love you, and I want to be with you, and $10 million isn't going to change that." His breath caught. "You love me. I love you." I stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of his body, close enough to see the tears gathering in his eyes. "I love you, and I'm tired of pretending that I don't." I'm tired of fighting it. I'm tired of running. Ethan, I'm not finished. I pressed my fingers to his lips, silencing him. I love you, but I need you to understand something. I'm not Aldrich. I'm not Marcus or Julian or any of the others. I'm Ethan Cole, systems architect, former broke freelancer, current reluctant tech mogul. I'm messy and stubborn, and I say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and I still have nightmares about the fire. But I'm here. I'm choosing you, and I need you to choose me. Not the memory of who I used to be, but who I am right now. Damien stared at me for a long moment, his gray eyes bright with tears and something else. Something that looked like wonder. You want me to choose you, he said slowly. Not the idea of you, not the past, not the curse or the binding or any of it. Just you, just me. He laughed. That surprised, joyful sound that I'd come to love, and pulled me into his arms. I choose you, he said against my lips. I choose you, Ethan Cole. Today, tomorrow, forever. I choose you. And when he kissed me, standing on the roof of the tower he'd built to find me, with the sun setting over the city and the binding pulsing softly in our chests, I felt something I'd never felt before. Not relief, not happiness, not even love exactly, though all of those were there. What I felt was home. The wedding was small by Damien's standards. Just the two of us, standing in the library surrounded by centuries of memories, with Miriam officiating and the subjects watching via video link from the lower levels. No flowers, no music, no elaborate reception. Just two men who had loved each other across lifetimes, finally making it official. I wrote my own vows, Damien said, holding my hands in his. But I threw them away, because none of them said what I actually wanted to say. Which is? I asked, my heart pounding. Thank you. His voice cracked. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for being exactly who you are. And for letting me love you. I laughed, blinking back tears. That's not a vow. Then I'll make one now. He squeezed my hands, his gray eyes steady on mine. I vow to let you be free, to never trap you again, with magic or contracts or fear. I vow to love you as you are, not as I remember. I vow to spend the rest of this lifetime, and every lifetime after if I have any say in it, making you happy. Your turn, Miriam said, looking at me. I took a deep breath. I vow to stop running, I said, to stop being afraid of what we are and what we could be. I vow to remind you every day that you're worthy of love, not because of what you've done, but because of who you are. And I vow to never let you forget that the best is yet to come. Damien's tears were falling freely now, and I reached up to wipe them away. By the power vested in me by the state of Washington and also, apparently, a centuries-old supernatural binding that neither of us fully understands, Miriam said dryly. I now pronounce you bound. You may kiss the groom. We kissed, and the binding flared warm in our chests, and somewhere in the distance, I could have sworn I heard the witch's voice, soft and almost kind. Take care of each other. We will, I thought back. We always do. That night we lay in Damien's bed. Our bed. Now, watching the city lights flicker through the window. His arm was around me. My head was on his chest, and the binding pulsed between us in a steady, soothing rhythm. Do you think it will last? I asked. This time, do you think we'll get to grow old together? I don't know. Damien pressed a kiss to my hair. But I know we'll try, and if death separates us again, I'll find you. I'll always find you. I know. I closed my eyes, feeling sleep tug at the edges of my consciousness. But let's not worry about that yet. Let's just be here. Now. Now, he agreed, his voice soft and full of wonder. Now is perfect. And it was. Not because we'd broken the curse or defeated the witch or solved all our problems. Not because we'd finally figured out how to be together without the binding forcing us. But because, after centuries of searching and losing and searching again, we'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. Love isn't about forever. It's about now. And right now, in this moment, With Damien's arms around me and the binding humming contentedly in my chest and the future stretching out before us like an open road, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Home. The end.
Thank you for watching our story. We're not going anywhere, and neither should you. Come back for more. Subscribe.